The night my brother tried to kill our retired police dog, 50 people stood around a dinner table and watched. Mark had pinned Max against an oak wall with a heavy chair, shouting that the dog had gone mad. Seconds earlier, Max had destroyed my mother's priceless wedding portrait. What none of us understood was that he was not attacking the house. He was trying to save someone trapped inside it. When he broke free and smashed through the wall, a tiny blue sneaker rolled out of the darkness. It belonged to my 7-year-old son. My name is Sarah Hawthorne. I was 36 years old, a divorced mother living outside Richmond, Virginia, when this happened. I had spent most of my life avoiding conflict, especially with my older brother Mark. He had money, confidence, and a talent for making everyone else feel small. I had learned to stay quiet. That night, staying quiet almost cost me everything. We were at Hawthorne House, the Victorian mansion where Mark and I had grown up. My mother Eleanor had lived there since 1976. Although my father had died 9 years earlier, Mark had organized an enormous golden anniversary dinner in their honor. He claimed it was a gift for our mother, but the 50 guests were mostly his clients and business partners. The party was really a stage, and Mark intended to be the star. He stood beneath the crystal chandelier, delivering a long speech about discipline, family values, and the fortune he had built. My mother sat beside him with a tired smile. I was farther down the table, wondering where my son Leo had gone. He had been playing upstairs before dinner, then returned to sit with my Aunt Susan. I assumed he was somewhere nearby. Max lay near the wall behind Mark. He was a 12-year-old German Shepherd and a retired police canine. During his working years, he had found missing children, tracked armed suspects, and received 3 commendations. In retirement, he had become my mother's quiet shadow. But he was not quiet that evening. He paced in tight circles beneath my parents' wedding portrait, a huge oil painting in a gold frame. His tail was low, his ears were flat. Every few seconds, he pressed his nose against the oak paneling and took deep, urgent breaths. Then he growled. Mark stopped speaking. "Put that mutt in the garage," he snapped. Mother called Max gently, but he ignored her. His entire body was focused on the wall. He scratched once, backed away, and barked so sharply that every glass on the table seemed to tremble. Mark marched toward him, furious that an animal had interrupted his performance. Before he reached the corner, Max jumped onto an antique side table. A crystal vase crashed to the floor. The dog caught the lower edge of the portrait in his teeth and tore it from its hooks. Guests screamed as the frame split. My mother covered her mouth and began to cry. Max ripped through the old canvas, then clawed at the wood behind it. Splinters flew. Blood appeared around his mouth, but he kept digging. Mark grabbed a heavy dining chair. Instead of pulling Max away by the harness, he drove the chair into the dog's ribs and pinned him against the wall. Max gave a terrible yelp. "Stop!" I shouted, rushing around the table. Mark twisted Max's leather collar until the dog began to choke. "I paid $5,000 for this dinner," he yelled. "I will not let this vicious animal destroy it. I'll put him down myself." I knew then that Mark was not protecting anyone. He was punishing Max for embarrassing him. The old shepherd planted his back paws against the floor and twisted with all the strength he had left. The metal buckle on his collar snapped. Mark fell backward holding a strip of broken leather. Max did not run. He lowered his head and charged the wall. The impact sounded like a car hitting the house. The oak panel cracked inward. Nails tore from the studs, and a dark opening appeared behind the ruined portrait. Max pushed again until the panel hung sideways. Dust poured into the dining room. For 1 second, there was only silence. Then we heard a faint scraping noise from inside the wall. Something dropped through the opening and bounced across the floor. A little light flashed blue, then red. It was one of Leo's sneakers. I stared at it, unable to breathe. Then I looked around the dining room. Leo was not beneath the table. He was not in the hallway. He was not beside Aunt Susan. "Where is my son?" I screamed. Susan's face turned white. She said Leo had left his chair almost 30 minutes earlier. No one had noticed because everyone had been listening to Mark. My mother looked at the hole, and a forgotten memory crossed her face. "The dumb waiter," she whispered. The mansion once had a small service lift running from the basement kitchen to the 3rd-floor servants' rooms. The ropes had been unsafe when my parents bought the house, so every opening had supposedly been sealed. Mark stepped in front of me. He told me Leo was probably hiding and accused me of becoming hysterical. For years, that word had been enough to silence me. Not this time. I shoved him out of my path. Max moved between us and bared his teeth, warning Mark not to come closer. Then I dropped to my knees among the glass, dust, and torn canvas. "Leo!" I called into the darkness. "Baby, can you hear me?" At first there was no answer. Then, from somewhere deep inside the wall, I heard my son's weak voice. "Mommy, I'm stuck." Aunt Susan handed me her phone, and I shone its flashlight into the opening. Behind the oak panel was a narrow brick shaft filled with cobwebs and black dust. An ancient wooden dumbwaiter box hung crookedly on rotting ropes. Leo was trapped between the box and the brick wall. His face was gray with soot. One arm was pinned behind him, and his legs hung above a 30-foot drop to the concrete basement. He opened his eyes when the light reached him. "It hurts," he whispered. "I told him I was there and that help was coming. My mother ordered someone to call 911. I reached toward Leo, but the moment my fingers touched his pants, the box moved. A rope creaked above us. Mark pushed beside me. He said we did not need firefighters tearing apart the house. Before I could stop him, he reached into the shaft and grabbed Leo's wrist. "I can pull him out," Mark said. Leo cried out. I begged Mark to let go, but he planted his shoes against the baseboard and pulled. A strand of rope snapped. The wooden box dropped several inches. Dust and pieces of mortar rained over Leo's head. A second strand broke, and the box tilted sharply toward the open shaft. Mark kept pulling. A pride would not allow him to admit that he did not understand the danger. Max understood it. The injured dog slammed his chest into Mark's legs and snapped his teeth near Mark's arm. Mark released Leo and crashed onto the floor. He screamed that Max had attacked him and demanded that someone shoot the dog. No one moved. Max returned to the opening and pressed his broad shoulders against the broken panel, using his body like a brace. Inside the shaft, the box rested at an angle. Only one thin strand of rope remained. Then sirens rose in the distance. Firefighters entered the house with rescue equipment. Captain Miller, a gray-haired veteran, cleared the guests from the room and inspected the shaft. When Mark claimed he had nearly saved Leo before Max attacked him, the captain's expression turned hard. He explained that one more pull would have snapped the last rope. The box would have fallen to the basement and taken Leo with it. "That dog did not attack you," Captain Miller told Mark. "He stopped you from killing the boy." For the first time that evening, the Mark had nothing to say. The crew slid hydraulic supports beneath the box and secured Leo in a rescue harness. 15 minutes later, they lifted him carefully through the broken wall. I caught him in my arms. He was bruised, filthy, and shaking, but he was alive. Leo immediately reached for Max. The old shepherd crawled toward him despite his injured ribs. My son wrapped both arms around the dog's neck, and Max licked the soot from his cheek. The image silenced everyone left in the room. Paramedics took Leo to the hospital. Max went to an emergency veterinary clinic with Aunt Susan. Before I climbed into the ambulance, I looked back at Mark. He stood beneath the chandelier in his torn suit, surrounded by the ruins of his perfect party. At the hospital, doctors treated Leo for dehydration, bruising, and dust inhalation. They said he had been trapped for at least 40 minutes. Another few minutes in that position could have damaged his lungs. A longer fall would almost certainly have killed him. Near midnight, Susan called. Max had 2 cracked ribs, cuts inside his mouth, and severe bruising where the chair had struck him. He would recover, but the veterinarian had documented every injury and contacted animal control as required by law. I should have felt only relief. Instead, one question kept circling in my mind. How had Leo entered a shaft that had supposedly been sealed for 50 years? The next morning, Leo gave me the first clue. He said he had followed a small remote control car into a closet on the 3rd floor. Behind several coats, he found a narrow wooden door. The door was already open. When he leaned inside to reach his toy, the floor moved beneath him. He also remembered something else. Earlier that afternoon, he had seen Uncle Mark's party men carrying cables through the same closet. I called my mother. She went silent. Mark had hired an audiovisual company to install speakers and decorative lights throughout the mansion. He had managed the work himself and refused to let Mother speak directly to the contractors. He told her he wanted the party to be a surprise. I asked Susan to keep Mark away from the house. Then Mother and I met Captain Miller and a city building inspector at the mansion. The 3rd floor closet door was not merely unlocked. Fresh screw holes showed that a safety panel had been removed recently. New black cables ran along the edge of the old shaft. Someone had opened a death trap to hide party wiring, then left it exposed where a child could find it. In the dust lay Leo's red toy car. The inspector photographed everything. Captain Miller asked who had authorized the work. Mother and I answered at the same time. Mark. I felt cold all over. My brother had not just ignored Max. He might have known exactly what was behind that wall. And if he knew, then his attempt to pull Leo out had not been simple ignorance. It had been a desperate effort to end the crisis before firefighters discovered what he had done. I spent the next 2 days beside Leo's hospital bed, while my mother and Aunt Susan began collecting evidence. We did not accuse Mark. We let him believe the family was too frightened and exhausted to ask questions. That was our first advantage. The Hawthorne house had security cameras at each entrance and in the upstairs hallways. Mark controlled the system through an account registered to his company. When Mother tried to open the recordings, the footage from the day of the party was missing. Mark called soon afterward. He told her the cameras had failed during a software update. Then he offered to pay for the wall, the painting, Leo's medical care, and even Max's veterinary treatment, as long as we kept the embarrassing accident private. That offer frightened me more than a threat would have. My mother asked him why he wanted secrecy. Mark said publicity could damage the family name. He warned that police would probably blame Mother for owning an unsafe house. He even suggested that animal control might destroy Max for attacking him. He was trying to scare us into silence while pretending to help. But Mark had forgotten one thing. My father had installed an older backup recorder in a locked cabinet in his study. It was not connected to Mark's company account. Susan found the key inside my father's roll-top desk. The recorder still worked. The footage showed Mark arriving at the house at 11 that morning with 2 technicians. At 11:18 he led them to the 3rd floor. At 11:42, one technician carried the narrow safety panel from the closet and placed it in the garage. At 12:06, the same man pointed repeatedly toward the open shaft while speaking to Mark. There was no audio, but Mark's reaction was clear. He looked into the shaft, waved his hand dismissively, and checked his watch. At 12:19 the technicians packed their tools and left. The closet remained open. At 5:37 that evening, a Leo's toy car rolled into the closet. My son followed it. 12 seconds later, Max came running down the hallway, barking and scratching at the door. He raced downstairs while Leo disappeared from the camera's view. The dog had known from the first moment. The recording also showed Mark hearing Max bark. He looked up the staircase, then ordered a server to close the dining room doors before his speech. I watched that moment again and again. Mark had heard the warning, and he had chosen applause over my child. We still needed proof of what the technician had told him. The audiovisual company refused to release its records without Mark's permission, so I called the 2 workers individually. The first would not speak. The second, a young man named Daniel Ruiz, agreed to meet me in the hospital cafeteria. Daniel looked sick with guilt. He said the crew had warned Mark that the 3rd floor opening was unsafe. They offered to seal it after running the cables, but it would take an extra hour and require a $200 safety kit. Mark refused. He said no guest would go into the closet and told them to finish the visible rooms instead. Daniel entered the warning in the digital work order and asked Mark to sign it. Mark signed with his finger on a tablet. After the rescue, Mark called the company owner and demanded that the warning be deleted. The owner obeyed because Mark was their biggest client. Daniel had secretly saved a screenshot before it disappeared. The screenshot contained Mark's signature beneath one sentence. Client assumes responsibility for leaving historical service shaft temporarily unsecured. I felt as if my brother had signed a confession. Daniel sent the image to Captain Miller and agreed to speak with investigators. The police obtained the original server records, including a log showing that Mark's assistant had deleted the camera files from the main system after midnight. The mystery was over. The betrayal was worse than I had imagined. Mark had knowingly left the shaft open to save time and a few $100s. He had ignored Max's warning because it interrupted his speech. He had nearly dropped Leo while trying to conceal the danger. Then, while my son was in the hospital, he had deleted evidence and threatened us with blame. But my mother was not finished. For years, Mark had managed the estate account and the family trust. He often reminded us that without him, Hawthorne House would collapse under taxes and repairs. After seeing the safety invoice, Mother asked an independent attorney and forensic accountant to review everything he controlled. Within 48 hours, they found another secret. Mark had been charging personal party expenses to the trust as state maintenance. The dinner, the lighting system, his luxury car service, and thousands of dollars in gifts for clients had all been paid from Mother's money. Over 3 years, he had taken more than $180,000. The anniversary party had never been his gift. My mother had unknowingly paid for the celebration Mark used to praise himself. When I told her, she did not cry. She sat beside Leo, stroked his hair, and became very calm. "Your brother believes money protects him," she said. "Let us show him what the truth can buy." We arranged a family meeting for Friday evening. Mother told Mark she wanted to discuss keeping the incident out of court. He agreed immediately. He thought we were ready to surrender. In reality, a detective, an attorney, and an animal control officer were waiting in the next room. Mark arrived at Hawthorne House wearing another perfect suit, and carrying a folder of settlement papers. Max was home from the clinic, resting on a thick bed near my mother's chair. When Mark saw the dog, he stopped in the doorway. "Why is that animal still here?" he demanded. Mother told him to sit. I placed my phone on the table and recorded the conversation. Mark did not object. He was certain the recording would capture us accepting his money. He pushed the folder toward me. The agreement offered to pay Leo's hospital bill if I promised not to discuss the accident, the party, or Max's injuries. It also required me to state that Mark had acted heroically during the rescue. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked him whether he had known about the open shaft. "Of course not," he said. "If I had known, I would have sealed it myself." Mother asked whether the technicians had warned him. Mark leaned back and smiled. "Mother, workers complain about everything. They wanted more money." The nothing they said suggested a real danger. That answer was important. He had moved from complete denial to admitting there had been a warning. I slid Daniel's screenshot across the table. Mark stared at his own signature. For several seconds, his face showed nothing. Then his eyes narrowed. "That image is fake," he said. I opened the laptop and played the backup camera footage. He watched himself inspect the shaft, dismiss the crew, ignore Max, and order the dining room doors closed. His confidence disappeared. He accused us of spying on him. He said the house belonged to the family, and that he had the right to make decisions. Then he blamed Leo for entering a private closet. My hands shook beneath the table, but my voice remained steady. "He is 7 years old. You are the adult who signed the warning." Mark turned to Mother. "This is what Sarah does. She creates drama, and you reward her. I have protected this family for years." Mother placed the forensic accountant's report on top of his settlement papers. "You protected yourself with my money," she said. As Mark read the first page, the color rose from his collar to his forehead. He insisted the payments were legitimate business expenses. Mother reminded him that a family trust was not his corporate entertainment account. Then she removed 3 documents from her handbag. The first ended Mark's authority over every estate account. The second removed him as trustee and executor of her will. The third demanded repayment of the money he had taken, plus the cost of Leo's treatment, Max's surgery, and the restoration of the house. Mark stood so quickly that his chair fell over. "You cannot do this to me," he shouted. "This estate survives because of my name." Mother looked smaller than him, but I had never seen anyone look stronger. "It survived your father's death," she said. "It will survive your disgrace." Mark pointed at Max and said the dog should have been destroyed the night he attacked. At the sound of his raised voice, Max lifted his head but did not growl. He simply watched. I told Mark the veterinary photographs had been submitted to animal control. I also told him Daniel had given a statement to police. Mark finally understood that the meeting was not a negotiation. The study door opened. Detective Harris entered with the animal control officer and Mother's attorney. The detective informed Mark that investigators had evidence of reckless endangerment, destruction of electronic records, and possible financial crimes. The animal control officer issued a citation related to Max's injuries and explained that additional charges would be reviewed. Mark tried to leave, but Mother held out her hand. "The keys," she said. He stared at her. "You no longer manage this house. You are no longer welcome here. Give me the gate and door keys." For most of my life, Mark had controlled every room he entered. He used anger until people stepped aside. This time no one moved. He pulled the brass key ring from his pocket and threw it onto the table. It scratched the polished wood, but Mother did not flinch. As Detective Harris escorted him outside, Mark turned toward me. "You did this," he said. "You destroyed your own brother." I looked at Max's broken collar, the which Mother had placed beside the evidence folder. "No," I replied. "You did this. I just stopped cleaning up after you." The front door closed behind him. For the first time since childhood, the Hawthorne house felt quiet instead of afraid. The legal process lasted 8 months. Mark's attorneys fought every accusation. They claimed the shaft was an old house accident, the deleted files were routine maintenance, and the trust expenses were misunderstandings. But digital records do not care about a man's reputation. The contractor's warning, Mark's signature, the Daniels testimony, the backup video, and the accountant's report told one clear story. 50 dinner guests had also seen him strike Max and try to pull Leo from the unstable shaft. Facing trial, Mark accepted a plea agreement. He received probation, community service, mandatory anger management treatment, and a court order barring him from owning or supervising an animal. He was required to repay the trust and cover every medical and repair expense. The court also imposed a substantial fine, part of which funded the county's retired K-9 medical program. the business consequences were even harsher. Clients who had attended the dinner stopped returning his calls. His company's board removed him as chief executive after the financial investigation became public. The man who had built his identity on control lost his title, his access to the estate, and the audience he valued more than his own family. I did not celebrate his pain, but I did feel relief. Justice did not return us to the night before the party. It did something better. It made sure Mark could never use our silence as a weapon again. Leo recovered faster than the doctors expected. For several weeks, he woke from dreams of falling, so I slept beside him with the hall light on. Max slept outside his door. Whenever Leo became frightened, the old dog lifted his head, and the sound of his tail against the floor reminded us that we were safe. Max's ribs healed slowly. The cuts in his mouth left a small scar along his muzzle. Captain Miller visited him twice and brought a new leather collar with a silver plate. It read, Max Hawthorne. Still on duty. My mother cried when she fastened it around his neck. The Hawthorne house changed too. A licensed restoration crew removed the entire dumbwaiter system. They filled the shaft, reinforced every floor, and inspected every forgotten corner of the mansion. A mother said a beautiful house was not worth preserving if the people inside it were unsafe. The wedding portrait was repaired by an art conservator. Almost every tear disappeared, although one thin line remained near my father's painted hand. Mother refused to hide it. Some scars should stay visible, she said. They remind us who tried to save us. When the dining room was finished, she moved the portrait 2 feet to the left. Beside it, she hung a new photograph taken on the night Leo came home from the hospital. In the picture, Leo sat on the living room rug with his arms around Max. I knelt beside them. Aunt Susan and Mother stood behind us. We looked exhausted, but we were smiling. Max sat in the center with his ears straight and his chest lifted like a proud officer. Mother placed his broken collar in a small glass case beneath the photograph. The money Mark repaid was used carefully. Part covered the medical bills and house repairs. Mother donated a large portion to a local search and rescue organization that trained dogs to find missing children. The remaining trust was placed under independent professional management. No family member would ever again control it alone. I also changed. Before that night, I believed keeping peace meant swallowing every insult and allowing stronger personalities to make decisions. I thought silence protected my son from family conflict. I was wrong. Silence had protected Mark. Boundaries protected Leo. Months later, Leo asked whether I hated his uncle. I told him the truth. I hated what Mark had done, but I did not want to spend my life carrying him in my heart. A justice had removed his power. Anger did not need to give it back. My son considered that answer, then asked if Max knew he was a hero. We were sitting beneath the 2 pictures in the dining room. Late sunlight crossed the restored oak wall. Max slept near the fireplace, his paws moving as if he were running through a dream. I called his name. He opened one eye. Leo walked over, knelt beside him, and whispered, "You found me." Max raised his head and pressed his nose against Leo's chest. My son laughed and wrapped his arms around him. That simple moment meant more than Mark's entire expensive party. The anniversary dinner had been designed to honor wealth, tradition, and a perfect family image. By the end of the night, the portrait was torn. The wall was broken and every secret was exposed. Yet what remained was more honest than anything Mark had tried to create. My mother was free from his control. My son was alive. Max was safe, and I had finally found my voice. People sometimes ask whether I regret helping the investigation that destroyed my brother's career. I do not. Mark was given many chances to tell the truth. He could have sealed the shaft. He could have listened when Max warned us. He could have waited for trained rescuers. He could have admitted his mistake at the hospital. Instead, at every turn, he chose his pride. Consequences are not cruelty. Telling the truth is not betrayal. Sometimes the most loving thing a family can do is refuse to protect the person who keeps hurting everyone else. 1 year after the rescue, the county held a ceremony for retired service animals. Captain Miller nominated Max for a civilian life-saving award. Leo and I stood beside him as the sheriff placed a medal on his collar. Max was 13 by then. His steps were slower, and gray fur covered his face, but when the crowd applauded, he stood tall. Mother sat in the front row with tears on her cheeks. Susan held the framed photograph from the dining room. Daniel Ruiz attended too. Speaking up had cost him his job with the audiovisual company, but the fire department later hired him as a communications technician. He told me that telling the truth had given him his life back. After the ceremony, Leo knelt in the grass and showed Max the medal. The dog sniffed it once, then looked toward me, as if asking whether he could finally have his promised dinner. We all laughed. That evening, we returned to Hawthorne House and shared a quiet meal around the same mahogany table. There were no wealthy clients, no speeches, and no performance. Just family. Mother served Max a thick slice of prime rib on a silver plate. Leo sat beside him, wearing 2 matching blue sneakers. I watched them together and remembered the tiny flashing shoe rolling out of the wall. For a moment, the memory hurt. Then Max rested his head on Leo's knee, and the fear loosened its grip. The old portrait still hangs in our dining room, but it is no longer the most valuable picture on that wall. The photograph beside it tells the story that matters: a child who survived, a family that finally faced the truth, and an old dog who refused to stop when every human in the room failed to listen. Mark believed power came from money, fear, and being the loudest voice at the table. Max taught us something different. Real power is loyalty. It is courage. It is hearing the warning that pride wants you to ignore. And sometimes, justice does not arrive wearing a suit or carrying a badge. Sometimes it arrives on 4 wounded paws, breaks through the wall, and brings your whole world back alive.